It was just a whispered breath, a string of filthy ancient Sicilian dialect her grandmother used to mutter, aimed directly at the broad, arrogant back of New York's most dangerous man. Vittoria thought she was safe behind her desk, shielded by her full figure and quiet, unassuming demeanor. But the towering boss of the Cavalier Syndicate stopped dead in his tracks. The air in the gallery froze. He turned slowly, a wicked, terrifying grin spreading across his sharp face. "Say that again," he commanded, his dark eyes locking onto hers as he stepped closer. But looking at me. The hushed, sterile atmosphere of Philip's auction house on Park Avenue was designed to make people feel small. For Vittoria Russo, it usually worked. At 28, Vittoria was a woman of undeniable substance. She was thick, curvy, and carried a size 18 frame with a mixture of quiet dignity and practiced invisibility. In a high-end Manhattan art world, populated by razor-thin socialites and starving interns, Vittoria knew her soft, full figure and heavy thighs made her an anomaly. She preferred it that way. Invisibility meant safety. It meant she could sit in the climate-controlled archives, her face buried in 16th century vellum, translating archaic Italian and restoring estate ledgers without dealing with the pretentious elite. But today, the elite had been replaced by something far more lethal. Dante Cavaliere did not walk into a room. He annexed it. Standing 6'4" in a custom-tailored charcoal Brioni suit that stretched taut over his broad shoulders, he radiated an aura of absolute terrifying violence wrapped in a veneer of high society. He was the undisputed head of the Cavalier crime family, a ruthless syndicate that had bled out its rivals from the docks of Brooklyn to the high-rises of Manhattan. Vittoria kept her head down, pretending to scrutinize a magnifying loupe over a rusted Byzantine coin. Her desk was situated in the corner of the private viewing room, where her boss, the perpetually sweating Mr. Henderson, was currently attempting to negotiate with the devil himself. "Mr. Cavaliere, I assure you the provenance of the Titian sketch is completely verified," Henderson stammered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "However, the estate requires a formal bidding process. We cannot simply pull it from the catalogue because you requested it." Dante didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He simply adjusted the cuffs of his shirt, the heavy platinum face of his Patek Philippe, catching the overhead gallery lights. "Henderson, I am not asking for a favor. The sketch belonged to my great-grandfather before it was stolen by the fascist regime in Palermo in 1938. It is mine. You will remove it from the catalogue and you will place it in the trunk of my car. Or I will buy this entire building and fire you before lunch." Henderson paled his eyes, darting around the room as if hoping for salvation. I have protocols to follow." "Protocols," Dante sneered softly, turning his back on the gallery director to admire a nearby Renaissance tapestry. Men who cling to protocols usually lack the spine to survive reality. Vittoria rolled her eyes. The arrogance of the man was suffocating. He was a thug in a $5,000 suit, bullying a terrified art director. The frustration bubbled up inside her, hot and familiar. She thought of her late grandmother, a tough, unyielding woman from the slums of Corleone, who would have taken a wooden spoon to a man this haughty. Without thinking, Vittoria muttered under her breath, her thick Sicilian accent bleeding through the quiet room. "Cornutu e spiru ci ti possano ammazzare. Horned and a cop, may they kill you." It was meant to be a private release of tension, a localized curse meant for the air, not for his ears. She had forgotten how absolute silence amplified the slightest sound. Dante stopped. His broad shoulders went perfectly still. Henderson gasped, looking at Vittoria as if she had just pulled the pin on a grenade. Dante turned slowly. The predatory grace in his movement made Vittoria's breath catch in her throat. His eyes, dark as bruised plums and framed by thick lashes, locked onto her. He didn't look at her the way the gallery patrons did, glancing quickly away from her soft, heavy curves, or looking right through her as if she were part of the furniture. Dante looked at her completely. His gaze swept over her full breasts, down to the soft swell of her stomach, hidden beneath her dark emerald dress, and back up to her flushed, terrified face. A slow, wicked grin spread across his lips. It was a terrifying sight. "Say that again," he commanded, his voice, a low, gravelly purr that vibrated in the floorboards. He took a step closer, his long legs eating up the distance between them. But looking at me. Vittoria swallowed hard. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She pushed her glasses up her nose, her fingers trembling slightly, but her stubbornness, a fatal flaw inherited from a long line of fiery islanders, refused to let her look away. She tilted her chin up, meeting his dark, predatory stare. I said, she began, her voice shaking only a fraction, that you are arrogant, and I used words my nonna taught me for men who throw their weight around like a caphone. Henderson looked ready to faint. "Mr. Cavaliere, please forgive her. She's just a translator." Vittoria apologized immediately. Dante held up a single, heavily ringed finger. Henderson snapped his mouth shut. Dante stepped right up to the edge of Vittoria's desk. Up close, he smelled of expensive bergamot dark espresso and something sharp and metallic that she instinctively identified as gun oil. He leaned down, placing both hands flat on her desk, caging her in. His eyes danced with dark amusement. "Your nonna had a foul mouth. Con tu espiru you wound mi gattina." He spoke the dialect perfectly, the rough edges of the Sicilian words rolling off his tongue with a dangerous intimacy. Vittoria's breath hitched. He knew the dialect. I assumed you were just another American who bought his suits in Milan and thought it made him Italian." She fired back, her cheeks burning crimson. She was acutely aware of how much space she took up in her chair. Yet under his gaze, she felt exposed, hyper-aware of every soft curve of her body. Dante let out a low, genuine laugh. It was a rich, chest-deep sound that seemed to shock his silent bodyguards standing by the door. "You have a sharp tongue to match that beautiful soft mouth." He glanced down at the antique documents scattered across her desk. "Translator, You read old Sicilian. I read everything she said, defensively crossing her arms over her chest." Dante straightened up, his grin fading into an expression of intense, calculating interest. He looked at Henderson. "The sketch goes in my car, and the girl comes with me." What Vittoria pushed her chair back, the wheels squeaking loudly against the hardwood. "I'm not going anywhere with you. I have a private library full of uncatalogued family ledgers from the 1920s, Dante said, his eyes never leaving hers, written in a localized cipher that has stumped 3 university scholars. I need an expert. You just proved you have the vocabulary. And the nerve. I have a job here, she argued, panic finally setting in. Dante pulled out a thick platinum money clip. He peeled off a stack of $100 bills, easily $10,000, and tossed it onto Henderson's desk. She is on an indefinite retainer. If you protest, I burn the building down. Understood? Henderson nodded frantically, scooping up the money. Absolutely, Mr. Cavaliere. She's all yours. Vittoria stood up, her full height, barely reaching his chest. I am not a piece of property you can just buy. Dante stepped into her space, his towering frame casting a shadow over her. He reached out his large, warm hand, gently gripping her jaw. The calluses on his thumb brushed against her cheek. I didn't buy you, Vittoria, he murmured, reading her name off the brass plaque on her desk. I bought your time. The rest of you, I plan to earn. The transition from the sterile quiet of the gallery to the opulent, terrifying world of the Cavaliere family happened in a dizzying blur. Vittoria found herself ushered into the cavernous back seat of an armored black Rolls-Royce Phantom. Dante sat beside her, radiating heat and an imposing stillness. He didn't speak on the drive downtown, instead working on a sleek encrypted tablet, leaving Vittoria to grip her purse to her chest and stare out the tinted windows at the passing blur of Manhattan. She felt entirely out of place. Her emerald wrap dress, a reliable staple from a plus-size boutique in Soho, suddenly felt cheap against the hand-stitched leather upholstery. She was acutely aware of her thighs pressing together of the soft roll of her stomach when she sat. She was waiting for the inevitable sneer, the subtle judgment she had endured her entire life from powerful men. But when she risked a glance at Dante, she found him already watching her. Not with disgust, and not with the polite, averted gaze of a gentleman pretending not to notice her size. He was looking at her with a heavy, undisguised hunger. "Stop doing that," Dante said quietly, his voice breaking the silence. Doing what she asked, defensively, shifting her purse to cover her lap. "Trying to shrink yourself," he replied, locking his tablet and setting it aside. "You are a woman of substance. Bella Formosa, Vera. Beautiful, curvy, real. Do not hide from me. I despise weak, fragile things. I prefer a woman I can actually hold on to." The bluntness of his statement made Vittoria's face flame. No one had ever spoken to her like that, so directly, stripping away her insecurities with a single dominant command. The car glided to a halt in front of Carbone in Greenwich Village. A bodyguard materialized to open the door, and Dante offered her his hand. She hesitated, then placed her smaller, softer hand into his massive grip. The calluses on his palms told a story of a man who didn't just order violence. He had built his empire with his own hands. Inside the restaurant was packed with A-listers and Wall Street elite. But the moment Dante walked in, the atmosphere shifted. The maitre d' scrambled to clear a path, leading them to a secluded velvet-lined booth in the back, shielded from prying eyes. "We are not just here to eat," Dante said, signaling the waiter to pour a bottle of Barolo that easily cost more than Vittoria's monthly rent. He reached into his suit jacket and placed a crumbling leather-bound ledger on the table between them. It smelled of dust, sea salt, and old blood. "This belonged to my grandfather, Vincenzo Cavaliere Dante," explained his demeanor shifting to pure business. He controlled the shipping lanes in Palermo before the war. When he was assassinated in 1941, this book was the only thing recovered from his study. It details the location of hidden assets bonds, untraceable bearer certificates, and deeds to properties across Europe. Vittoria leaned forward, her professional curiosity momentarily overriding her fear. She carefully opened the fragile cover. The pages were filled with erratic, spidery handwriting. "I've had experts look at it," Dante continued, sipping his wine. "They say it's gibberish, a coded cipher." Vittoria squinted at the faded ink. "It's not a cipher," she murmured, tracing the letters with her fingernail. "It's a phonetic spelling of a very specific, isolated dialect from the Madoni Mountains. My great-uncle used to write like this to keep his recipes a secret from the neighbors. They spell the words exactly how they sound when spoken with a thick, toothless accent, combining numbers and local slang." Dante's eyes flared with intense satisfaction. "I knew you were the right choice." The waiter arrived with plates of their famous, spicy rigatoni vodka and a massive veal parmesan. Vittoria normally policed her eating in public, especially in front of men terrified of reinforcing stereotypes. She started to order a simple salad, but Dante had preempted her. "Eat," he commanded, gently pushing the plate of rich, steaming pasta toward her. "You need your strength to read that chicken scratch." and I enjoy watching a woman who knows how to appreciate a meal. For the first time in years, Vittoria didn't hold back. She ate the spicy, rich pasta, the flavors exploding on her tongue, and she drank the heavy, oaky red wine. As they ate, she began translating the first few pages aloud. It was a tedious process, mapping the slang to standard Italian and then to English. "He's listing shipments of olive oil," Vittoria said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "But olive oil is crossed out with a symbol that looks like a crescent moon." Dante's jaw tightened. The crescent moon was the sigil of the Gallo family, our oldest rivals. He wasn't listing shipments. He was listing bribes paid to the port authorities to let the Gallos smuggle weapons. My grandfather was keeping a record of their treason against the Commission. Vittoria looked up, a chill running down her spine. If the Gallo family knew this existed, they would kill to destroy it. Dante finished smoothly cutting a piece of veal. "And kill anyone who has read it. Which brings us to a slight complication. Mia dolce, my sweet." Vittoria dropped her fork. "What complication?" Dante leaned across the table, his dark eyes intense, a dangerous smile playing on his lips. "The head of the Gallo family. Lorenzo Gallo is the silent partner who owns Wellington and Cross Antiquities. Your boss Henderson is on their payroll. I went to the gallery today, knowing Henderson would try to stall me. I needed an excuse to create a scene, to steal the ledger back from their vault before they realized what it was." Vittoria's blood ran cold. You used me. You set up that whole confrontation. I didn't plan for you." Dante admitted his gaze, dropping to her lips. "I planned to shoot Henderson in the knee and take the book, but then you cursed me out in perfect Corleonese. You were a serendipitous, beautiful surprise, and now you are the only one who can read the ledger. And if the Gallos find out," she whispered, panic rising in her chest. "They already know," Dante said calmly, checking his watch, "which is why you cannot go back to your apartment tonight. Or ever again. From this moment on, you belong to the Cavalier family, and I protect what is mine." The reality of her situation didn't truly hit Vittoria until the iron gates of Dante's compound slammed shut behind them. Located on a heavily wooded, secluded estate in Tot Hill, Staten Island, the property was a fortress disguised as a modern architectural marvel of glass, steel, and black marble. Armed men patrolled the perimeter with suppressed rifles, their silhouettes barely visible in the heavy fog rolling off the Atlantic. Vittoria was led into a massive open-concept library on the second floor. Floor-to-ceiling, bulletproof windows overlooked the dark expanse of the ocean. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows over the plush leather sofas and mahogany tables. "You will sleep in the West Wing," Dante told her, shedding his suit jacket and tossing it over a chair. He unholstered a heavy black Sig Sauer pistol from his shoulder rig and placed it casually on the desk next to the ledger. "My men have already gone to your apartment in Brooklyn. They are packing your clothes, your laptop, and whatever sentimental items you need. Your landlord has been paid a year's rent to break your lease." "You are insane," Vittoria said, her voice shaking as she paced the length of the Persian rug. The plush carpet felt soft beneath her heels, but she felt like a caged animal. "You can't just abduct me from my life." Dante poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He walked over to her, his towering frame forcing her to stop pacing. He pressed a glass of scotch into her trembling hand. "Your life." Vittoria was a quiet, agonizing wait for something real to happen. He said, his voice dropping to a hypnotic low timbre. He reached out his knuckles, brushing against the soft curve of her waist. Vittoria gasped at the contact, a jolt of electricity shooting through her veins. He didn't shy away from her size. His large hand spread wide, claiming the fullness of her hip with a possessive grounding pressure. "You hid in those archives," he murmured, leaning closer until she could feel the heat of his breath against her neck. "A woman with a fire like yours, hiding among dusty paper and weak men. You cursed me to my face. You didn't flinch when I threatened your boss. You are built for a world heavier than the one you were living in. You are built for my world." Vittoria's heart pounded so hard, she feared it would shatter her ribs. She looked up into his dark, fathomless eyes, searching for a lie for the cruelty she had come to expect from powerful men. But all she saw was a fierce, protective obsession. "Translate the book, Vittoria," he urged softly. "Help me crush the men who betrayed my bloodline, and I will give you anything you desire." She swallowed hard, the fiery liquid burning a path down her throat as she took a desperate gulp of the scotch. "Fine," she whispered. "I'll do it." She moved to the heavy mahogany desk sitting in the oversized leather chair. Dante stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his chest. She opened the ledger to the middle pages, adjusting the brass desk lamp. "He's writing about a physical location here," Vittoria murmured, her brow furrowing as she squinted at the archaic text. "He says, the iron belly of the beast beneath the street of Walls. Wall Street. The old Chase Manhattan vault." Dante leaned over her shoulder, resting one hand on the desk, the other on the back of her chair. "The bearer bonds. They've been sitting in a safety deposit box for 80 years. "Wait," Vittoria said, her finger tracing a line of red ink. "There's an addendum. The key is held by the betrayer, the bird of prey." "Gallo." Dante hissed, his jaw clenching. "Gallo means rooster, but my grandfather referred to them as vultures." Before he could say another word, the world exploded. A deafening crack shattered the stillness of the night. The bulletproof glass of the floor-to-ceiling windows spider-webbed violently. A second shot tore through the compromised glass, burying itself into the mahogany desk, inches from Vittoria's hand. Wood splinters erupted like shrapnel. Vittoria screamed a raw sound of pure terror. "Down!" Dante roared. His massive body crashed into hers, tackling her out of the chair. They hit the floor hard, Dante taking the brunt of the impact as he shielded her entirely with his body. The heavy, muscular weight of him pressed her into the Persian rug. More suppressed gunfire ripped through the room, chewing the leather sofas to shreds and shattering the crystal decanter on the bar. "Stay down. Do not move." Dante barked, his voice utterly devoid of panic. It was cold, lethal, and precise. He rolled off her, seamlessly snatching the Sig Sauer from the desk in one fluid motion. The heavy oak doors of the library burst open. 3 men in dark tactical gear flooded into the room, assault rifles raised. Vittoria curled into a ball beneath the overhang of the desk, clamping her hands over her ears. She squeezed her eyes shut, but she couldn't block out the horrifying sounds. Dante didn't take cover. He moved with a terrifying predatory speed. 2 sharp, concussive pops rang out from his pistol. The first intruder dropped instantly, a neat hole between his goggles. The second man swung his rifle, but Dante was already moving, firing twice into his chest and once into his throat. The third man dove behind a shattered leather sofa, laying down a hail of suppressing fire. Bullets chewed into the desk above Vittoria's head. She let out a choked sob, her full body trembling violently against the floorboards. Dante ducked behind a marble pillar, reloading his weapon with a quick metallic clack. "Vittoria!" he shouted over the gunfire. The light hit the main switch under the desk. Vittoria forced her eyes open. Through the haze of gunpowder and flying debris, she saw the small brass toggle switch mounted beneath the lip of the desk. She had to stretch, exposing her arm. She took a ragged breath, reached up and slammed her hand against the switch. The library was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. The intruder paused, disoriented. That millisecond of hesitation was fatal. Dante moved through the dark like a ghost. A dull thud, a sickening crunch of bone, and a final gurgling breath echoed through the dark room. Silence descended heavy and suffocating, broken only by the crackle of the fireplace and the distant sound of alarms wailing from the perimeter. "Vittoria!" Dante's voice was close. The lights flickered back on as the backup generators kicked in. He knelt beside her. His white dress shirt was spattered with blood, though none of it appeared to be his. His face was a mask of pure, violent rage, but when his eyes found hers, the rage melted into desperate concern. He reached out his large, blood-stained hands, gently gripping her shoulders and pulling her out from under the desk. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his eyes scanning her body, checking for wounds. "Did they hit you?" No. Vittoria stuttered her teeth, chattering as shock set in. She looked at the bodies sprawled across the beautiful rug, the pools of crimson soaking into the silk. "Oh my God, you killed them." "They came for the book," Dante said, grimly pulling her into his chest. He didn't care about the blood on his shirt or the chaos around them. He just held her tight, his massive arms wrapping around her full figure, burying his face in her hair. "And they came for you. Lorenzo Gallo sent a hit squad into my home." He pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. The terrifying grin from the gallery was gone, replaced by a dark, unbreakable vow. "They missed," Dante whispered, his thumb wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. "And now I am going to burn their entire empire to the ground, and you, my beautiful, brilliant Vittoria, are going to help me do it." The morning sun bled through the shattered windows of the library, casting jagged shadows across the blood-stained Persian rug. Vittoria sat perfectly still on the edge of the plush leather sofa, a thick cashmere blanket wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The violent reality of the night before clung to her skin like a heavy, suffocating film. 3 men were dead because of an 80-year-old leather ledger she held in her trembling hands. Dante Cavaliere entered the room, his towering frame casting a shadow that seemed to swallow the morning light. He had changed into a crisp black turtleneck and dark slacks, looking less like a businessman and more like the lethal predator he truly was. Behind him walked an older, stern-faced woman, carrying a garment bag from Bergdorf Goodman. "This is Rosa," Dante said, his voice a low, soothing rumble that instantly calmed the frantic beating of Vittoria's heart. "She is my personal tailor. She is here to ensure you are properly armored for tonight." Vittoria blinked her exhausted mind, struggling to catch up. Tonight, Dante, a hit squad, just tried to murder us. We should be calling the FBI, not getting fitted for a gala. Dante moved toward her, his dark eyes softening as he knelt before the sofa. He reached out his large hands, gently cupping her knees through the cashmere blanket. "The authorities answer to the highest bidder in this city, Gattina. Lorenzo Gallo owns the precinct captain in this borough. If we call the police, we invite Gallo's assassins directly through the front door." He brushed a stray lock of dark hair behind her ear, the calluses on his thumb sending a jolt of electricity down her spine. "Tonight, Lorenzo is hosting a private high-stakes charity auction at the Metropolitan Club on 60th Street. He will be wearing the Gallo family crest ring. The ring is the physical key to the old Chase Manhattan vault at 28 Liberty Street. We are going to walk into his party, and we are going to take it from him." Vittoria swallowed hard, staring at the terrifyingly calm expression on the Mafia Boss's face. "And how exactly do we do that without starting a war in the middle of the Upper East Side?" A wicked, dangerous grin spread across Dante's face. "By hiding in plain sight, and by giving him something far more distracting to look at." He gestured to Rosa, who unzipped the garment bag, revealing a breathtaking floor-length gown in deep blood-red silk. I had this pulled from the Valentino private collection. I told them your exact measurements. My measurements. Vittoria flushed red instinctively, pulling the blanket tighter around her full figure. Dante high fashion houses don't design for women my size off the rack. I'm a size 18. I have thick thighs and a stomach. This isn't going to work. Dante stood, his expression darkening with a fierce, possessive intensity. He grabbed the edges of her blanket and pulled it away, forcing her to stand before him. "Do not insult the woman I am looking at," he commanded softly, his hands moving to grip her waist, his thumbs pressing into the soft, beautiful curves of her hips. "You are not a mistake to be hidden in oversized fabric, Vittoria. You are a masterpiece meant to be worshipped." Rosa spent the entire night tailoring that silk to explicitly honor every single curve, every heavy, gorgeous inch of you. Tonight you will not shrink. You will step into that room and you will make every starving socialite and pathetic frail woman in that club feel exactly like what they are invisible. Tears pricked the corners of Vittoria's eyes. For 28 years, she had been told to diet, to hide, to blend in. Now the most dangerous man in New York was looking at her body as if it were a religion he desperately wanted to practice. The fitting took 2 hours. When Vittoria finally looked in the antique gilded mirror, she gasped. The red silk clung to her heavy breasts, cinched her waist tightly, and draped over her wide hips like liquid fire. A daring slit exposed one thick, creamy thigh. She didn't look fat. She looked like a Renaissance painting brought to violent, breathtaking life. She looked powerful. Dante waited by the armored Maybach, idling in the compound's driveway. When she stepped out accompanied by 4 heavily armed bodyguards, the Mafia boss stopped breathing. His dark eyes devoured her, tracing the line of her throat, down to the deep plunge of the neckline. He closed the distance between them, his hand coming up to softly grip her jaw. "Lorenzo Gallo is a dead man," Dante whispered, fiercely, pressing a searing, brutal kiss to the corner of her mouth. "Because if he looks at you for more than 3 seconds tonight, I am going to rip his eyes out with my bare hands." The drive into Manhattan was thick with tension. Vittoria sat with the ancient ledger open on her lap, using the reading light in the back seat to decipher the final addendum her great-uncle had translated. "Dante," she murmured, tracing the faded ink. "The ring isn't just a key for the vault mechanism. The ledger says, 'The blood of the vulture seals the iron.' It's a biometric lock. The vault at 28 Liberty Street was retrofitted in the 90s. It requires the physical ring and Lorenzo's actual fingerprint." Dante's jaw clenched, his knuckles turning white on his glass of scotch. "So we cannot simply steal the ring. We need his hand. Or," Vittoria said, her brilliant mind racing as she tapped her laptop, "we bypass the biometric scanner entirely. The Metropolitan Club operates on the same localized server grid as the Liberty Street Vault's security mainframe. If I can get close enough to Lorenzo's private server room during the gala, I can upload a malware packet that forces the Vault's biometric scanner to accept your fingerprint as the master override. But I need 5 minutes alone at the terminal, and someone needs to keep Lorenzo occupied." Dante stared at her, an expression of profound awe crossing his sharp features. He didn't just desire her body, he revered her intellect. "You are an absolute terror, Vittoria Russo," he murmured, lifting her hand and pressing his lips to her knuckles. "I will keep the viper occupied. You slice off its head." The Metropolitan Club was a masterclass in Gilded Age opulence. Enormous crystal chandeliers dripped from painted ceilings, and the air was thick with the smell of expensive champagne, rare orchids, and old corrupted money. As Dante and Vittoria stepped through the brass-handled doors, the entire ballroom seemed to hold its collective breath. Dante Cavaliere was a phantom in these circles, a myth spoken of in terrified whispers. Seeing him walk into the lion's den, dressed in a sharp tuxedo with a predator's grace, sent a ripple of absolute panic through the elite crowd. But it was the woman on his arm that truly stopped the room. Vittoria kept her head high, her heavy curves cutting a striking fiery silhouette against the sea of pale, emaciated socialites in their muted pastels. She felt Dante's large hand resting firmly on the small of her back, a branding heat that tethered her to reality. He radiated violence and possession, sending a clear, unspoken message to every man in the room. Look but do not touch, or you will die. Across the ballroom, standing by a massive marble fireplace, was Lorenzo Gallo. He was a slender, elegant man in his late 50s, with silver hair and cold reptilian green eyes. On his right hand rested the heavy gold family crest ring. When he saw Dante, a sinister smile stretched across his thin lips. "Dante!" Lorenzo called out, his voice smooth and coated in venom. He stepped forward, flanked by two massive men whose poorly fitting tuxedos did nothing to hide their shoulder holsters. "To what do I owe the absolute displeasure of your presence at my charity gala? I heard you had a bit of a pest problem at your Staten Island home last night." Dante's smile was equally terrifying. He didn't raise his voice, but the immediate vicinity fell dead silent to listen. "A minor nuisance, Lorenzo. I exterminated them. I brought the trash out to the incinerator this morning. I suggest you hire better help. The last batch bled all over my favorite Persian rug." Lorenzo's green eyes flickered with raw fury, but he quickly masked it, his gaze shifting to Vittoria. He looked her up and down, his lip curling in a faint, mocking sneer. "And who is this? I didn't realize the Cavalier family was purchasing their escorts by the pound now." The air in the room instantly dropped 20 degrees. Vittoria felt Dante's muscles lock like coiled steel beneath his tuxedo jacket. Before Dante could draw the weapon concealed beneath his arm, Vittoria stepped forward, her red silk gown swishing violently around her legs. "I am Vittoria Russo," she said, her voice ringing out clear and steady, laced with her thick, beautiful Sicilian accent. She stared Lorenzo dead in the eyes, refusing to shrink. "I am the woman currently translating Vincenzo Cavaliere's private ledger, the same ledger that details exactly how your grandfather, a cowardly, pathetic bootlicker, sold out the commission to the fascists for a handful of silver." The entire ballroom gasped. Lorenzo's face turned an ugly, mottled purple. No one spoke to him like that. Absolutely no one. "You miserable, fat little bitch," Lorenzo hissed, stepping forward, his hand raising. He never finished the motion. Dante moved with blinding, catastrophic speed. He grabbed Lorenzo by the throat, hoisting the older man an inch off the marble floor and slamming him brutally against the fireplace mantel. Lorenzo's bodyguards reached for their weapons, but Dante's men already had guns, pressed directly into their kidneys. "Breathe another word to my woman," Dante growled, his face inches from Lorenzo's terrified eyes, his voice a demonic rasp. "And I will tear your throat out with my teeth and feed it to the stray dogs in the alley." The ballroom erupted into chaos. Socialites screamed and scrambled for the exits. This was exactly the distraction Vittoria needed. While Dante held the head of the Gallo family, pinned by the throat, Vittoria slipped away, rushing up the grand staircase toward the club's private offices on the second floor. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her thick thighs chafing slightly against the silk of her dress as she sprinted down the carpeted hallway. She found the server room, a heavy oak door with a digital keypad. Pulling a small descrambler from her clutch, provided earlier by Dante's security chief, she plugged it into the panel. The light blinked green, and she shoved the door open. The room was freezing, filled with the hum of massive server racks. Vittoria threw her clutch onto the console, pulling out her modified tablet. She plugged the USB cable directly into the mainframe port. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the club's rudimentary firewalls in seconds. She located the network bridge connecting Lorenzo's personal network to the Liberty Street vault. "Come on, come on," she muttered, sweat beading on her forehead. The upload bar inched across the screen. 70%. 80%. Suddenly the server room door burst open. Standing in the doorway was Dominic Lorenzo's chief enforcer, a massive, scarred brute, wielding a suppressed pistol. He pointed it directly at Vittoria's chest. "Step away from the console, sweetheart." Dominic grunted, racking the slide of his weapon. "Before I paint these servers with your brains." Vittoria froze. The upload bar hit 95%. She looked at the gun, then back to the screen. She needed 3 more seconds. She refused to let Dante down. She refused to go back to being the frightened girl in the archives. "I said step away," Dominic roared, stepping into the room. "You're too late," Vittoria said coldly. She slammed her palm onto the execute key just as the bar hit 100%. The vault override was locked in. Dominic snarled and raised his gun, his finger pulling the trigger. A deafening gunshot shattered the cold air of the server room. Vittoria screamed and threw her hands up, expecting the agonizing burn of a bullet. But the pain never came. Dominic stood frozen for a fraction of a second, a dark red circle blooming perfectly in the center of his forehead. His eyes rolled back, and his massive body collapsed backward, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. Standing in the hallway, gun raised and smoking, was Dante Cavaliere. His tuxedo was completely ruined, his tie ripped off, and a fresh cut bled freely over his eyebrow. He stepped over the enforcer's dead body, his chest heaving as he holstered his weapon. He didn't say a word. He crossed the room in 3 massive strides, grabbed Vittoria by the waist, and pulled her flush against his solid, unyielding chest. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling her scent like a drowning man taking in oxygen. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands frantically roaming over her full hips, her back, her arms checking for bullet holes. "No," Vittoria sobbed, wrapping her arms around his thick neck, holding on to him with everything she had. "I'm okay. Dante, I'm okay. I got it. The override is uploaded. Your fingerprint will open the vault." Dante pulled back, looking down at her flushed, tear-streaked face. The pride and absolute adoration in his dark eyes stole her breath away. "I have never in my life met a woman as brave as you," he whispered reverently. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the heavy gold Gallo family crest ring, dripping with fresh blood. He had literally torn it off Lorenzo's hand. "Lorenzo will survive the night, unfortunately. His men pulled him away before I could finish the job." Dante said, his voice cold and flat. "But he is crippled, and his vault is now ours. Let us go to Liberty Street, Vittoria. It is time to claim what belongs to the Cavaliere family." He laced his large, calloused fingers through hers, the bloody gold ring clinking against her soft skin. As they walked out of the server room, stepping over the wreckage of their enemies, Vittoria knew she could never go back. She was no longer just an appraiser. She was the queen of the New York underworld, and the devil himself was completely, irrevocably at her mercy. The midnight air in the financial district was dead and silent, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked chaos they had left behind on the Upper East Side. The armored Maybach slid to a halt in the subterranean loading dock of 28 Liberty Street, the tires screeching softly against the polished concrete. Dante stepped out first. His ruined tuxedo jacket had been discarded miles ago, and the white dress shirt beneath it was rolled to the elbows, exposing heavy forearms, corded with muscle dusted with gunpowder and stained with the blood of Lorenzo's men. He reached back into the cavernous back seat, his large hands wrapping effortlessly around Vittoria's waist to lift her from the vehicle. She stumbled slightly, her heavy, red silk gown brushing the damp concrete floor, her adrenaline crashing hard. Dante caught her immediately, his grip anchoring her to the earth, his broad chest a wall of absolute security. "Stay behind me," he murmured, his dark eyes scanning the shadowy pillars of the parking garage, his hand instinctively resting on the grip of his holstered weapon. The vault was located 5 stories below street level, a forgotten relic of the old Chase Manhattan infrastructure that Lorenzo Gallo had hijacked decades ago. They descended through the maintenance elevators, bypassing the modern security checkpoints, using the hacked access codes Vittoria had loaded onto Dante's encrypted tablet. The air grew progressively colder, the deeper they went, smelling of stale ozone grease and ancient dust. When the heavy elevator doors finally parted, they stood before a massive circular door of solid titanium and steel. It was an engineering marvel, a hulking beast of metal covered in complex locking mechanisms and thick hydraulic tubes. Vittoria's breath hitched a shiver running down her spine. "The iron belly of the beast," she whispered, quoting her great-uncle's ledger. Dante approached the biometric scanner mounted on the stone wall beside the vault. The scanner glowed with a menacing crimson light, casting a bloody hue over his sharp features. He looked back at her, his expression grim. "If your malware packet failed to bridge the server gap, Vittoria, this scanner will lock down the entire sublevel. It will suck the oxygen from the room and incinerate the contents of the vault." "Are you absolutely certain about the upload?" Vittoria stood tall. Her thick thighs were trembling under the silk gown, and her heart was beating frantically, but her voice remained completely steady. She refused to cower. "I don't fail, Dante. I locked the override sequence myself. Put the ring on." He held her gaze for a long moment, his eyes burning with a mixture of dark pride and raw obsession. He slipped the heavy blood-stained Gallo crest ring onto his right pinky finger, stepping up to the console and pressing his thumb firmly to the glass reader. The machine whirred loudly, a high-pitched mechanical whine piercing the silence. It was reading the metallic ridges of the gold ring alongside his thumbprint. For 3 agonizing seconds, the light remained a solid, unforgiving red. Vittoria held her breath, her hands clutching the soft, curved swell of her stomach, praying to every saint her grandmother had ever mentioned. Then the scanner chirped. The light flashed a brilliant, blinding green. A heavy mechanical groaning echoed through the cavernous basement as massive steel gears disengaged behind the titanium plating. The vault door hissed violently, breaking a pressurized atmospheric seal, and swung slowly inward with the terrible weight of a dying leviathan. Dante pushed the door fully open, his gun raised ready to fire at any hidden guards. But the vault was empty. Instead of men, the circular walls were lined from floor to ceiling with thousands of rusted safe deposit boxes. According to the ledger, Box 808 held the key to the Gallo family's absolute destruction. Dante moved to the specific box, inserting the crest ring directly into the central keyhole. It clicked perfectly. He pulled out a long, incredibly heavy metal tray and set it on the central steel table beneath the flickering fluorescent lights. Vittoria stepped up beside him, her professional curiosity overriding her fear. Inside the tray were meticulously stacked bundles of pristine bearer bonds from the 1930s, worth billions in modern, untraceable currency. But that wasn't what made Dante's breath catch in his throat. Beneath the bonds lay a crumbling, leather-bound diary and a stack of black and white photographs. Vittoria picked up the top photograph, her eyes widening in horror. It showed Lorenzo Gallo's grandfather, standing beside a high-ranking Italian fascist general, smiling and shaking hands over a table covered in smuggled military rifles. She gently opened the diary. It detailed every bribe paid to corrupt officials, every sanctioned assassination, and every treasonous betrayal the Gallos had committed against the other 5 families of the New York Commission. "It's not just hidden wealth," Vittoria breathed, looking up at Dante, the sheer magnitude of the discovery washing over her. "It's undeniable proof. This diary proves the gallows broke the sacred blood oath. It's a death sentence." "Yes," a cold, raspy voice echoed from the vault entrance. "It is." Dante spun around instantly, stepping in front of Vittoria and shielding her completely with his massive frame. Standing in the doorway, bleeding heavily from a gunshot wound in his shoulder and leaning heavily on a wooden cane, was Lorenzo Gallo. He looked like a cornered, desperate rat, his tuxedo torn, clutching a black detonator switch in his trembling left hand. "I couldn't let you take it." Lorenzo wheezed, his green eyes mannequined wide with absolute madness. "My men wired this vault with C4 explosives 10 years ago as a fail-safe. If I burn tonight, Cavaliere, you and your fat little whore burn with me." Dante's gun was instantly leveled directly at Lorenzo's head, but he didn't fire. A dead man could still drop a dead man's switch. Lorenzo Dante said his voice, a lethal vibrating purr that echoed off the titanium walls. "You press that button, and your entire bloodline ends tonight. Every cousin, every nephew. But if you drop the switch and walk away, I will let you keep your miserable, pathetic life in exile." "Liar!" Lorenzo screamed, spit flying from his lips. Vittoria peeked around Dante's broad shoulders, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She noticed something Lorenzo, in his panicked bleeding state, hadn't. The small signal light on the detonator switch was blinking a frantic, unlinked yellow. The thick steel, lead, and titanium walls of the subterranean vault were completely blocking the radio frequency. The detonator couldn't connect to the explosives. "Dante," she whispered rapidly in thick Corleonese dialect, keeping her voice incredibly low. "The signal is dead. The walls are too thick. He's holding a paperweight." Dante didn't even blink. He didn't look back at her. He simply grinned. It was the exact same wicked, terrifying grin he had given her in the gallery when she had first cursed him. Bang! The single suppressed shot from Dante's pistol took Lorenzo Gallo perfectly between the eyes. The old man collapsed, instantly dead, before he hit the ground, the plastic detonator clattering harmlessly against the concrete floor. Dante lowered his weapon, the suffocating tension breaking instantly. He turned to Vittoria, his chest heaving. He reached out, pulling her violently into his arms. The kiss he delivered was punishing, desperate, and entirely consuming, tasting of gunsmoke adrenaline and absolute victory. 3 weeks later, the sun set slowly over the sprawling Cavalier compound on Tot Hill, casting a warm, golden hue over the rolling waves of the Atlantic Ocean. The destruction of the Gallo family had been swift, brutal, and absolute. With the bearer bond seized and the treasonous diary distributed to the heads of the remaining mafia families on the commission, Lorenzo's empire was systematically dismantled overnight. Dante had claimed their territories, their shipping ports, and their legitimate businesses, cementing himself as the undisputed, untouchable king of the New York underworld. But none of that power, none of that immense wealth mattered to him right now. Vittoria stood on the sweeping balcony of the master bedroom, the cool evening ocean breeze playing with the hem of her sheer black silk robe. She was no longer the frightened invisible appraiser hiding in a dusty, climate-controlled archive. She moved with the quiet, devastating confidence of a woman who fully knew she commanded the most dangerous beast in the city. The heavy, beautiful curves of her body were proudly, boldly displayed beneath the delicate fabric, her thick thighs and soft, full stomach illuminated beautifully by the fading golden sunlight. Strong, heavily scarred arms wrapped securely around her waist from behind. Dante pulled her back flush against his bare, muscular chest. He buried his face in the soft crook of her neck, inhaling the sweet, intoxicating scent of vanilla and bergamot that belonged exclusively to her. "The Commission has officially recognized the transfer of all Gallo assets," Dante murmured, his warm lips brushing against her heated skin, sending pleasant shivers down her spine. "The Gallo family name is entirely erased from our history, and my grandfather's ledger is finally at rest." Vittoria leaned back deeply into his embrace, her hands coming up to rest over his massive tattooed forearms. "And what about us?" she asked softly, her tone carrying a mix of vulnerability and newfound strength. Dante gently turned her around. His dark eyes, usually so cold, calculating and unreadable to the rest of the brutal world, were filled with a burning, reverent obsession. He looked at her not just as a lover, but as a brilliant equal. "There is no us without you, Vittoria," he said fiercely, his voice vibrating with absolute certainty. He reached up gently, cupping her face, his calloused thumbs softly stroking her cheekbones. "You walked into a literal war zone in a red dress. You hacked a biometric mainframe while a loaded gun was pointed directly at your heart. You didn't just survive my dark, violent world. You completely conquered it. You conquered me." He took a step back and slowly, deliberately dropped to one knee. Vittoria gasped loudly, her hands flying up to cover her mouth, tears instantly springing to her eyes. Dante Cavaliere, the ruthless Mafia king, who bent to absolutely no one, knelt gracefully at her feet. He pulled a small, elegant black velvet box from the pocket of his slacks and flipped it open. Inside rested a breathtaking, flawless, 6-carat blood-red ruby, surrounded by a halo of crushed diamonds sparkling fiercely in the twilight. "I told you in that gallery that I planned to earn you," Dante said, his voice thick with raw, unfiltered emotion. "You are the only woman who has ever seen the absolute monster that I am and refused to look away. You never shrank from me, and I will never let you shrink from the world again. You are my brilliant, beautiful, perfect queen. Marry me, Vittoria. Let me spend the rest of my life worshipping every single gorgeous, heavy inch of you." Tears streamed freely down Vittoria's cheeks. She thought of her tough Sicilian grandmother, of the fiery curses she used to mutter, of the quiet, lonely life she thought she was forever condemned to live invisible, overlooked, ashamed of the space she naturally occupied. But here in the arms of a man who ruled the shadows, she was seen. She was everything. Yes, she sobbed happily, a radiant, blinding smile breaking across her flushed face. "Yes, Dante. Of course I will." He slid the heavy, magnificent ring onto her trembling finger, the red ruby catching the last brilliant light of the sun. He stood up swiftly, lifting her effortlessly into his strong arms. Vittoria wrapped her thick, soft legs tightly around his waist, her hands tangling desperately in his dark hair as he carried her inside, moving purposefully toward the massive four-poster bed. "You are entirely mine," Dante growled fiercely against her soft lips, laying her back gently against the cool silk sheets, his massive body covering hers, shielding her completely from the rest of the outside world. "And you are mine, Vittoria," whispered back fiercely, her beautiful Sicilian accent thick and totally triumphant. "Try to forget it, and I'll curse you out all over again." Dante laughed, a rich, deep, joyous sound that belonged exclusively to her ears. He kissed her deeply, passionately, sealing their unbreakable fate together. The Mafia empire was finally secure, but the only treasure Dante Cavaliere truly cared about protecting was the beautiful, brilliant, fiercely curvy woman currently holding his dark heart safely in her hands. If you are hooked on Vittoria and Dante's explosive, dangerous love story, you won't want to miss what happens next. Will Vittoria survive the deadly Mafia war she's been dragged into, or will Dante's dark world consume her completely? hit that like button, share this story with your fellow romance drama lovers, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a part. Drop a comment below. What do you think is waiting inside that Chase Manhattan vault? See you in the next video.